July 7th, 1947, Roswell Army Airfield. First Lieutenant Robert Shirky is in the base operations office when corpsmen begin carrying debris through the building, thin metal fragments, an I-beam, loading them onto a B-29 bound for Fort Worth. Nobody tells him what the material is. For 50 years, he says nothing. Then at 74, he breaks his silence, claiming to be one of the last living witnesses to whatever was recovered from that New Mexico ranch. But when his account is finally tested against the surviving record, what holds up and what doesn't? Robert Shirky served as the Assistant Flight Safety Officer at Walker Airfield, the installation later renamed Roswell Army Airfield. For decades, his experience remained private, only reaching the public in the 1990s after discussions with UFO researchers. His first widespread national exposure came in an October 1997 New York Times profile. By then, Shirky had transitioned to a career as a university instructor, an academic background providing personal context rather than historical corroboration. Sensational promotional slogans suggesting a threat to his life function as marketing tools rather than proof of real danger. The popular label of last living witness also remains unverified. This designation often blurs the line between a direct debris observer, an active recovery team participant, and someone merely retelling another person's story. On July 7th, 1947, Shirky was inside the base operations office when orders arrived to ready a B-29 flight to Fort Worth. While flight preparation personnel scheduled the departure, Shirky watched military corpsmen carry several pieces of wreckage through the building. He later described these objects as brushed metal sheets measuring roughly 18 by 24 inches, along with a small metallic I-beam. This single moment represents the actual boundary of Shirky's direct observation. He did not visit the Foster Ranch debris field, nor did he see a crashed craft or recovering bodies. When Shirky later claimed that government authorities wanted him dead, he offered no physical evidence of an active threat. His first-hand testimony rests entirely on what passed through the airfield operations office during those few hours of flight preparation. In early July 1947, rancher W.W. Mac Brazel came across an extensive field of debris on the Foster Ranch, located outside Corona, New Mexico. The material lay scattered across a wide area of the sheep pasture, drawing his attention during a routine inspection of the property. Brazel described finding tough, foil-like pieces, light wooden sticks, plastic or rubber-like components, fragments of tape, and a heavy, paper-like material. On July 7th, Brazel traveled to Roswell, carrying a box of the collected material to show Chavez County Sheriff George Wilcox. Wilcox immediately contacted the Roswell Army Airfield to report the unusual discovery. Following the sheriff's notification, the military dispatched intelligence personnel to secure and examine the site. Major Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer, inspected the initial samples at the sheriff's office. Later that day, Marcel, along with Counterintelligence Corps officer Sheridan Cabot and Sergeant Lewis Rickett, traveled to the ranch to retrieve the remaining debris. This operation was a straightforward effort of collection and transport. The team spent hours gathering the scattered fragments from the soil, loading them into their vehicles, and driving them back to the airfield. At this stage, the activity remained a localized military recovery of unidentified materials, occurring hours before any public statements or official labels were drafted. On July 8, 1947, Roswell Base Public Information Officer Walter Haut issued a press release announcing that the military had recovered a flying disc The announcement made immediate front-page news, with the Roswell Daily Record running the headline, RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. But the extraordinary claim lasted only a few hours. That afternoon, the military transferred the recovered material to Fort Worth, Texas. Brigadier General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force, held a press conference in his office, accompanied by Major Jesse Marcel. Ramey announced that the debris was actually the remnants of a weather balloon equipped with a radar reflector. Reporters watched as Ramey and Marcel displayed pieces of torn metallic foil, balsa wood sticks, and a rubber-like balloon envelope. Fort Worth photographer J. Bond Johnson took a series of photographs of the men kneeling with the scattered material, creating a permanent visual record of what the military claimed to have recovered. By the morning of July 9th, the headline of the Roswell Daily Record shifted to General Ramey empties Roswell saucer, reflecting the official retraction. National newspapers from the New York Times to the San Francisco Chronicle ran the weather balloon explanation. By July 10th, the sensational story had completely faded from the front pages, leaving the public record sealed with a conventional explanation. Historical analysis requires a strict division between immediate records and later recollections. Every newspaper report, photograph, interview, affidavit, and recording must carry a specific date and provenance to establish its position in the historical sequence. For instance, the July 8, 1947, front page of the Roswell Daily Record and the photographs taken that same afternoon by J. Bond Johnson represent a distinct class of source material. A recorded interview conducted in the 1990s or a posthumous affidavit filed decades later cannot be treated as equivalent to a document created during the actual days of the recovery. Memory is subject to later cultural influences, whereas the contemporary archive of July 1947 remains frozen in time. When examining this contemporaneous public record, certain absences are clear. These early printings and military releases contain no mention of alien bodies, non-human entities, or a second crash site. While this absence does not disprove the existence of private military claims, it defines the limits of what was officially documented at the time. Furthermore, the early descriptions of foil, balsa wood, and rubber do not establish a specific craft shape, and the surviving photographs from General Ramey's Fort Worth office document only the materials displayed to reporters, rather than their true point of origin. The public military statements of July 1947 establish the official public position, which may not represent a complete ledger of private military knowledge. The stark gap between the initial flying disc announcement and the subsequent weather balloon retraction has generated two competing interpretations. One reading of this gap suggests a deliberate military cover-up designed to hide anomalous technology from the public. Another reading views the rapid reversal as a hurried, clumsy correction after officers realized that highly classified balloon equipment from Project Mogul had been recovered. The archival record documents the public correction itself, but it does not resolve the intent behind it. The physical wreckage recovered from the Foster Ranch in July 1947 is gone. No independent laboratories or civilian archives hold the original metal foil sheets, balsa wood struts, or rubber fragments. Instead, the historical trail breaks at the gates of the Fort Worth Army Airfield, leaving investigators with an empty ledger where physical evidence should be. Without physical remains to analyze, historical analysis must rely on the written record, This makes the distinction between contemporaneous documents and later recollections essential. A paper document printed in 1947 provides a stable reference point, while spoken testimony recorded decades later functions as a shifting target. Over the years, the descriptions of the debris did not remain uniform. Rather than merging these accounts into a single narrative, historians examine each version as a product of its time. The initial 1947 reports describe materials resembling foil and paper. By the late 1970s and 1990s, some of the same witnesses began recalling extraordinary metals with anomalous properties. This divergence demonstrates how memory behaves over time. Human recollection is susceptible to retrofitting, where high-profile media coverage and persistent questioning can subtly reshape an individual's genuine memory of an event. A witness may recall a decades-old observation with absolute sincerity, even if cultural narratives have colored the details. When the surviving trail is incomplete, verification requires independent, matching sources. Without physical artifacts to test, the truth must be built on documents that can be cross-referenced rather than memory alone. In 1989, an interview was reportedly recorded with a man named Chester Elroy Mauban, later described as a member of the Roswell recovery team. Mauban's precise military rank and documented base assignments remain unclear, and no full original transcript or established archival recording of this session has been made public. Instead, his account survives through a 2024 Facebook reproduction and subsequent video reposts. Every extraordinary claim from this encounter must be attributed directly to Mauban. He stated that the retrieved beings weren't human. He claimed there were 3 entities in total, 2 that vanished and 1 that remained alive. He also described a second site littered with debris fragments as thin as paper, where military corpsmen supposedly swept up bodies. The dramatic phrase associated with this recording, "I have nothing left to lose," serves as the framing for his deathbed testimony, rather than proof of its physical authenticity. Without contemporary military records to locate Mauban at the site, his dramatic narrative exists within a modern publication chain, leaving researchers to weigh his final words against a complete absence of corroborating historical evidence. Robert Shirky's 1997 New York Times profile mentioned only metallic debris, but a later biography added a claim that military corpsmen recovered bodies. Jesse Marcel's descriptions underwent a similar shift. In 1947, he described lightweight foil and rubber. By the late 1970s, his accounts grew more extraordinary, detailing indestructible metal sheets with mysterious markings. In the 1980s, Roswell undertaker Glenn Dennis introduced a highly disputed narrative involving a base nurse and military requests for child-sized coffins. By 1997, Frank Kaufman asserted he saw 5 dead alien bodies, a claim lacking any independent documentation. That same year, secondary reports emerged of a sealed affidavit from Walter Haut, alleging a cover-up in recovered corpses, though the original document remained unavailable. Meanwhile, later materials from counterintelligence officer Sheridan Cavett provided no sworn confirmation of non-human remains. This wave of books, interviews, and affidavits from the late 20th century continues to circulate. Yet these separate, often conflicting channels do not provide automatic independent corroboration. In 1994, a United States Air Force investigation associated the Foster Ranch debris with Project Mogul. This classified military initiative used high-altitude balloon trains equipped with radar reflectors to detect acoustic waves from distant Soviet nuclear tests. To ensure these balloon payloads were visible to radar tracking systems, they carried specialized radar reflectors, constructed from balsa wood and metallic foil. The operational assembly included plastic or latex balloon material, acoustic sensors, and light structural supports. Because the project carried a secret classification during the early Cold War, military authorities opted to use the simpler public designation of a standard weather balloon. 3 years later, the Air Force issued its 1997 Case Closed report, which reaffirmed a non-extraterrestrial explanation for the incident. This second publication specifically addressed later reports of recovered bodies by examining unrelated high-altitude experiments. Beginning in the late 1940s and continuing into the 1950s, the military conducted parachute drops using anthropomorphic test dummies, such as those named Megan and Mr. E, to study human survivability at extreme altitudes. The investigation proposed that these dummy drops served as the origin for the later accounts of recovered non-human remains, as regional residents and personnel merged separate memories over several decades. This explanation remains an interpretive model rather than definitive proof that a test dummy was present on the Foster Ranch in July 1947, leaving the official explanation as a hypothesis to be evaluated against the surviving archival record. To resolve the conflicting accounts of July 1947, the historical data must be organized into a strict 4-level evidence ledger. At the first level stands the documented record. This category consists of the immediate 1947 military recovery efforts, the official communications between military bases, the first public announcements, the original weather balloon retraction, and the local newspaper reports printed during the week of the incident. At the second level lies later recorded first-hand recollection. This includes Robert Shirkey's observation of military personnel moving wreckage through the base operations office, and Major Jesse Marcel's initial descriptions of the physical debris. At the third level is retrospective testimony. This group covers Chester Mauband's 1989 deathbed interview, the posthumous affidavits of Walter Haut, the statements of Frank Kaufman, and the various civilian accounts recorded during the late 20th century revival of the case, often decades after the events transpired. At the fourth level exists interpretation and speculation. This category includes all claims regarding non-human identities, recovered alien bodies, government intimidation of military personnel, and the existence of a second, more remote crash site. An audit of this ledger reveals significant gaps. The historical record contains no matching police records, no medical logs from the airfield hospital, no official recovery inventories, and no independently verified physical remains to support any of these extraordinary claims. Furthermore, no complete independently verified chain of custody exists for any alleged artifact or non-human remain. Even the ongoing disagreement over who qualifies as the last living witness, including the disputed status and role of counterintelligence officer Sheridan Cavett, represents unresolved provenance rather than historical corroboration. In assessing these separate tiers, historical analysis must weigh sincerity separately from accuracy. The decades that elapsed between 1947 and the first public accounts allowed modern cultural narratives to influence personal memories. While the broader documentary framework of the official Air Force explanation remains anchored in archived records, the later claims of recovered bodies lack any contemporary paper trail. Keeping what is not corroborated distinct from what is disproved, the ledger reveals a clear finding. The historical record supports the recovery and transport of unusual debris far more strongly than the extraordinary additions. As the last living voices of Roswell fade, we are left with a choice between the comfort of myth and the silence of the archive. Without physical proof, these late-life testimonies remain matters of faith, not verified history. Perhaps the real mystery today isn't what fell in the desert, but why we still desperately want to believe. What do you think? Share your thoughts below.